Elara Preston balanced two heavy paper bags against her chest, one elbow awkwardly nudging the elevator button as her breath fogged from the cold. She had no idea who lived in the penthouse of the Astoria Grand on Fifth, just that they tipped well, usually in cash, and ordered groceries like they didn't know what a price tag was. The elevator chimed, and she stepped in, brushing a strand of hair from her face with her wrist. Penthouse, she muttered to herself, watching the numbers light up on the panel. She had delivered to this building twice before, but never this high up. When the elevator doors opened, she stepped into a corridor that looked like it belonged in a movie. Marble floors. Gold-accented sconces. A giant black double door with no number. She hesitated, then knocked. It took a few seconds before the door opened, and when it did, Elara's breath caught in her throat. The man standing there was tall, probably mid-30s, with messy dark hair, a 5 o'clock shadow that looked intentional, and a jawline that could slice glass. He wore a white shirt, sleeves rolled up, the top 2 buttons undone, and looked like he just walked out of a GQ shoot. "Groceries?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yeah. Yes. Sorry. 2 bags," Elara said, stepping forward. He reached out and took one bag from her arms. "You can set that one on the counter." She stepped inside, her shoes squeaking slightly on the polished floors. The place was massive. Floor-to-ceiling windows stretched across the back wall, showing off a skyline view of Manhattan. A black grand piano sat near the window. The kitchen was open, sleek, and modern, like something from a cooking show. "Nice place," she said before she could stop herself. The man gave a lazy half-smile. "Thanks. I just moved back in." He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a few bills. "This enough?" Elara glanced down. 100. For groceries that cost maybe 30. Yeah. More than enough. Thank you. "I'm Lucian Avery," he said, extending a hand. "And you are?" "Elara Preston." His touch was warm, steady. Too long for a grocery handoff, but not in a creepy way. Just curious. "You deliver often?" he asked, folding his arms casually as she turned to leave. "Sometimes. Depends on the day. I also waitress. And do pet sitting. And tutor math, believe it or not." Lucian let out a low laugh. "Multi-talented. I'm just trying to make rent, honestly." Something flickered in his eyes. "Not pity. Something else." "Well, Elara Preston," he said, walking her to the door, "thank you for the groceries. And for not judging my ridiculous order of 6 different cheeses. I only judge people who don't tip," she said, and stepped back into the hallway. The elevator doors closed, but her heart was still racing. 3 days later, she got the order again. Same penthouse. Same random mix of groceries: imported olives, artisan bread, truffle oil. She barely had time to process the weird flutter in her stomach before she was back in the elevator, bags in hand. Lucian opened the door before she knocked this time. "I timed you," he said. She blinked. "What?" "You were 2 minutes faster than last time." She laughed. "You time your grocery deliveries?" "Only when I'm bored." He stepped aside again, letting her in. The groceries were lighter this time, but she still lingered after setting them down. "You don't seem like you get bored easily," she said. Lucian shrugged. "You'd be surprised. It's quiet up here." He slid a smaller envelope across the kitchen island. "For you." She opened it. Another 100. "Lucian, this is too much." He leaned against the island, watching her. "You carried groceries to the top of a high rise in freezing weather. I think it's fair." She narrowed her eyes at him. "Are you always this generous with delivery people?" "No," he said quietly. "Just you." Elara stared at him, caught off guard by the directness in his voice. She didn't know what to say. Lucian broke the tension with a shrug. "You want coffee? Or tea?" "I made too much." She hesitated. "I don't bite." he added, holding up his hands. And I swear I'm not trying a weird rich guy move. Just company. The sensible part of her brain said no. But the truth was there was something about him. Not just the looks, or the penthouse, or the voice that made her want to melt. Something else. Like a sadness around the edges. Okay, she said. I could use a cup. Coffee turned into an hour talking. Then too. She found out he used to work in finance, had disappeared from the city for a few years, and came back recently. He asked about her job, her life, her dreams. Actually listened. By the time she left, the sun had dipped below the skyline and she couldn't stop smiling. The third delivery came with a note. Come up when you're done. No groceries this time. Just dinner. She stared at it for 10 minutes before deciding she was absolutely not going. Then changed her mind and went anyway. When she got there, Lucian opened the door in a black button-down and slacks. The dining table by the windows was set with candles, 2 plates, wine glasses, and a view that made her gasp. You cooked? She asked, stunned. He grinned. I ordered from the best Italian place in the city and put it on plates. I'm not that talented. She laughed. Still counts. Dinner was easy. Fun. They talked about everything and nothing. And when she stood to leave, Lucian walked her to the door again. Elara? She turned. He looked almost nervous. Can I see you again? Not just for groceries. Her heart skipped. I thought that's what tonight was. He smiled. Then can I make it official? She nodded. Yeah. I'd like that. And just like that, it started. Over the next few weeks, they saw each other more. No more deliveries. Just dinners. Walks. Long conversations at midnight over expensive wine she couldn't pronounce. He never made her feel small. Never showed off. But it was clear this man had money. Serious money. She caught a glimpse once his phone lit up with an alert from a financial app. 7 figures. And the name of his company, which she Googled later and nearly choked when she saw the valuation. Lucian Avery wasn't just rich. He was a millionaire. Quiet. Private. The kind that didn't flaunt it. And he was falling for her. But what scared Elara most was that she was falling too. The first time Elara stepped into Lucian's world beyond the penthouse, she realized just how far she'd crossed a line she never expected to approach. One moment she was helping him choose fresh basil at a quiet indoor farmer's market near Soho, and the next he was guiding her into the back seat of a sleek, matte black car with tinted windows and silent leather seats that smelled faintly of bergamot and new money. I assumed we were just grabbing brunch, she said, glancing out the window as the driver pulled them into traffic. That was the plan, Lucian answered, adjusting the cuff of his charcoal coat. Then I remembered the chef at this place in Hudson Square only does his brunch menu once a month. I thought we'd try it. Elara blinked. You called the chef? I called the restaurant, he said without looking at her. He answered. The building they arrived at didn't have a sign, just a narrow brass plaque beside a heavy iron door. Inside, the lighting was warm and golden, and the scent of citrus and rosemary floated through the air like it had nowhere better to be. A hostess greeted Lucian by name before leading them through a private corridor and into a glass-walled terrace that overlooked an enclosed courtyard with ivy-covered walls. Elara sat down slowly, her fingers brushing the linen napkin folded like origami on her plate. This place is like a museum of taste. Lucian poured her water from a glass bottle and handed her the menu. It's more relaxed at night, he said. But I thought you'd appreciate the daylight. She glanced at him, caught off guard by how genuine he sounded. You chose this for me? He met her gaze, steady and quiet. I remember things you say. Elara turned to the menu, mostly to hide the way her chest fluttered. She ordered a citrus salad and something with wild mushrooms she couldn't pronounce, then looked back at him. You never told me what made you leave New York before. Lucian leaned back in his chair, the sunlight catching the fine lines at the edge of his eyes. "You're asking the hard ones today. You said I could?" His fingers tapped once against his water glass. "I had a brother. Older. He was the one who started Avery and Knox with me. We built it from nothing." "Well, from a dorm room and a lot of ramen." Elara's breath caught at the past tense. "Was?" Lucian nodded once. "He passed away. 3 years ago. Motorcycle accident in the Catskills. I got the call while I was in Zurich, trying to close a deal that doesn't even exist anymore." "I'm so sorry," she whispered. He looked away briefly, the air around him tightening. "After that, I couldn't be here. Every corner of this city reminded me of him. So I left. Bought a cabin in Montana, grew a beard, learned to fly fish badly. But eventually, I had to come back. For the company. For everything we built." Elara reached across the table and touched his hand, her voice soft but firm. "I'm glad you did." Lucian's eyes flicked to hers, and something shifted between them, less flirtation, more gravity. The food came, and they didn't speak for a while. As they ate, the clatter of silverware and low hum of jazz filled the air. Then, just as she was finishing the last bite of her salad, Lucian said, "I haven't felt comfortable talking about him in a long time." "I'm honored you did," she said, setting her fork down. Lucian leaned forward slightly, his voice low and sure. "You're different, Elara." She tilted her head. "Different how?" "You don't ask questions to get answers. You ask them to understand." The words landed like a stone in her chest, not heavy in a bad way, but like something that suddenly belonged. After brunch, they walked through the courtyard, his hand brushing hers occasionally but never quite holding it. Then, without warning, he paused beneath one of the hanging lanterns and turned to face her. "I want to invite you somewhere," he said. "Okay," she replied cautiously. "There's a gala next Saturday. For a non-profit I support." The events at the Metropolitan Club. Black tie. Very boring speeches. Open bar. "I thought maybe you'd come with me." "Lucian, I don't have a gown. Or heels. Or anything that fits in that world. You don't need to worry about that," he said quietly. "I'll take care of it." "That's not the point," she argued. "I don't want to show up as some dressed-up accessory." He looked at her for a long moment. "Then don't. Show up as yourself. That's who I want next to me." She hesitated, heart thudding. "If I say yes, you have to promise not to buy me something ridiculous like a diamond necklace the size of a peach." Lucian's mouth twitched. "I'll do my best to restrain myself." She rolled her eyes. "That's not a promise." "No," he said, stepping closer. "But it's honest." By the time he dropped her off at her apartment, the city was glowing in that rare way it did just before dusk, soft and golden, like the skyline had been painted in sepia. He walked her to her door, and neither of them moved for a moment. "I should go," she said. "You should," he agreed. Neither of them did. Then, slowly, he reached out, brushing her cheek with the back of his hand. "You've turned my whole world upside down, Elara." She swallowed. "We barely know each other." "I know I want to," he said. She leaned into his touch for just a second, then pulled away. "Good night, Lucian." He didn't try to kiss her. He just nodded, stepped back, and let her close the door. Inside, Elara leaned against the wood, her pulse thundering. She wasn't just falling anymore. She was tumbling headfirst into something she didn't know how to name. 3 days later, a garment bag appeared on her doorstep with a handwritten note attached. "Just a dress. No diamonds. Still keeping my promise." Inside was a floor-length black gown, elegant and understated, with a neckline that was sharp but not showy. The fabric felt like water between her fingers, and the label was one she'd only ever seen on red carpets. Her fingers curled around the hanger as she stared at it. It wasn't just a dress. It was a key. An invitation. A line she could still choose not to cross. But the truth was, she didn't want to stay on her side of the line anymore. Saturday came faster than she expected. Lucian sent a car, a vintage Bentley, with a driver who knew her name and offered her bottled water with a linen napkin. When she arrived, Lucian was waiting at the base of the marble staircase in a tuxedo that fit him like it had been sewn onto his body. He looked up and saw her, and for a moment, everything else in the room, the chandeliers, the murmuring guests, the glittering gowns, blurred behind the way his expression shifted. "Elara," he said, walking toward her. "You look like the answer to a question I didn't know I was asking." She laughed, nerves flaring. "That's a dangerous line." "It's not a line," he said. "It's the truth." He offered his arm, and she took it. The night unfolded in a haze of introductions, champagne, and stolen glances. Lucian never left her side. When people spoke to him, he always included her. When others tried to pull him into conversations, his hand stayed on the small of her back, grounding her. During the first speech, she leaned in and whispered, "You weren't kidding about the boring." Lucian leaned closer. "I only brought you to suffer with me." They slipped out before dessert and ended up on the rooftop terrace, surrounded by string lights and the faint scent of gardenia. The city stretched out before them like a promise. "I could get used to this," she said, leaning on the railing. Lucian stepped behind her, not touching, just near. "You're not used to it yet?" She turned to face him. "It's not just the view." He studied her face. "What is it then?" "You," she admitted. Lucian lifted a hand, gently brushing a strand of hair from her temple. "Then I'll make sure I'm worth getting used to." The words hit somewhere deep. And this time, when he leaned in, she didn't hesitate. The kiss wasn't hesitant or testing. It was sure, like something that had been waiting to happen since the second she knocked on his penthouse door. When they finally pulled apart, Lucian's voice was low. "Come home with me." Elara looked at him, heart pounding, fear and want warring in her chest. "I'm not asking for anything you're not ready for," he added. "Just come back. Talk. Be near." She nodded, because she couldn't do anything else. And as they walked into the night, hand in hand, Elara realized she was already far past the point of no return. The elevator doors opened directly into Lucian's penthouse, and Elara stepped out slowly, heels in hand. The silence inside was warm, not hollow like the space had been holding its breath for her return. Lucian walked in behind her, jacket slung over his shoulder, bow tie undone and hanging loose around his neck. He didn't turn on any lights. Instead, the city beyond the windows bathed the room in a soft amber glow, and the hum of distant traffic filled the quiet. Elara moved toward the windows, barefoot on the cool wood floor, and stared out across Manhattan. "It's strange," she said. "I've lived here my whole life, and I've never seen the city from this high up at night. It doesn't even look real." Lucian stopped a few feet behind her. "Most people only see it from this angle in photos. Or on postcards." She glanced back at him. "And you? What do you see?" He hesitated, his voice softer than usual. "The life I thought I wanted. Before I realized it always felt empty." She turned fully, arms folded. "And now?" "Now," he said, stepping closer, "I see you standing in front of it. And it finally makes sense." The air between them tightened. Elara didn't look away, even as her pulse kicked up. "Why me? You could have anyone." Lucian's expression didn't change, but his voice dropped a note. "Because you're the only one who doesn't care about any of this." He gestured slightly around the room. "And because I've never met someone who makes me feel like the world isn't watching." She blinked, and her throat tightened. He wasn't trying to impress her. He was just telling the truth. "I don't know if I can fit into your world," she said quietly. "It's not just the money. It's the people. The expectations. I'm not polished, Lucian. I can't pretend to be someone I'm not." He stepped into her space, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his breath. "I don't want someone polished. I want someone real. And you, Elara, are the most real thing I've ever known. Her chest rose slightly. Then don't lie to me. Ever. I won't. She nodded once. Okay. He reached for her hands and drew her slowly toward the couch. They didn't speak as they sat, her legs curled beneath her, his arm resting behind her shoulders. For a while, they just watched the skyline. The quiet between them was easy, but it hummed with something deeper. Then, in the stillness, Lucian said, "There's something I haven't told you." Elara looked over, her spine straightening. "What is it?" "My parents are still alive. But we haven't spoken in years. They never approved of the way I ran the company. Or how I handled things after my brother died." Elara waited, sensing there was more. "They wanted me to sell. Take the profit, walk away. They thought grieving meant shutting it all down. But I couldn't. I wasn't ready to let go of him that way." She reached for his hand. "Holding on doesn't mean you're stuck. Sometimes it just means you're not done remembering." Lucian stared down at their joined fingers. "They blamed me. For not being there. For not stopping him from getting on that damn bike in the first place. You blame yourself, don't you?" His jaw tightened. "Every day." Elara leaned her head on his shoulder. "You can't change the past, Lucian. But you can decide what kind of future you want. And who you want in it." He turned to look at her. "I want you." Her heart skipped. "Then try not to push me away when things get hard." "I won't." They stayed like that for a long time, the city glittering beneath them, their silhouettes framed in gold. Over the next several weeks, their lives became more entwined. Lucian started showing up at the cafe where Elara picked up extra shifts, sitting at the corner table with a laptop and ordering too much coffee just to watch her work. She introduced him to the tiny bookstore she loved in the East Village, and he bought the battered poetry collection she held in her hands too long, then left it on her pillow the next morning. He never made her feel like a project. Never tried to change her. But still, the lines between their worlds blurred. One afternoon, she stepped out of her apartment building and nearly tripped over a courier holding a long black box. Inside was a pair of shoes, soft leather, handmade, not flashy. Just perfect. She called him that night. "You said you wouldn't go overboard." "I didn't," Lucian said. "I noticed your sneakers had a hole in the toe. That doesn't mean I need designer flats. I didn't buy them because of the brand. I bought them because I want you to walk through the world like you deserve to be comfortable." Her breath caught, and she couldn't respond for several seconds. "Elara," he said quietly, "I know what it looks like. But this isn't about money. It's about care. You matter to me. I just want to show it the way I know how." She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the shoes. "Okay. But if you ever buy me a yacht, I'm walking straight into the river." "No yachts," he promised. "Maybe a kayak. But only if you ask." But not everything stayed perfect. It started the night Lucian brought her to a fundraiser at the Frick Collection. The crowd there was older, colder. The kind of people who weighed others by their last name and their net worth. Elara wore a navy gown that shimmered under the chandeliers. She looked stunning. But as soon as they entered, a woman in a floor-length silver dress leaned into Lucian's ear and whispered something that made his expression darken. Elara didn't ask at first. She tried to focus on the art, the conversations, the way Lucian's hand stayed firmly at her back. But later, in the car, she asked softly, "Who was she?" Lucian didn't answer right away. "Her name's Margaret Levington. Her father was one of our earliest investors. She's been circling since I came back." "Circling?" "She thinks I owe her something. Because she knew my parents. Because she once played tennis with my brother. Because she thinks I'm supposed to marry into a name like hers." Elara looked out the window. "And do you?" Lucian turned to her, eyes sharp. "No. I don't owe anyone anything. Especially not her." "Then why did you look so angry?" He hesitated. "Because she said you were temporary." The word hit harder than she expected. She doesn't know me, Elara said quietly. No, she doesn't. But she knows how to get under my skin. I shouldn't have let her. Elara folded her arms. I don't care what she thinks. But I do care if you start believing it. I don't. She looked at him. Then show me. Not with gifts. With trust. He nodded, jaw tense. You're right. But the seed had been planted. A week later, she noticed the shift. He got quieter. His texts came slower. He started canceling dinners with vague excuses. One night, he didn't answer her call. Elara stood outside his building, heart pounding. The doorman hesitated. He hasn't come down in a few days. Said he wasn't taking visitors. She rode the elevator up anyway. When he opened the door, he looked exhausted. Eyes shadowed. Shirt wrinkled. Elara, he said. What's going on? He stepped aside wordlessly. Inside, the penthouse felt colder. The curtains were still drawn. A half-finished glass of scotch sat on the counter. I needed space, he said. You pushed me out. I didn't mean to. You're doing it right now, Lucian. He turned away. I thought I could handle this. You. Us. But the more I care, the more I feel like I'm waiting for it all to fall apart. She swallowed. You're scared. Yes. So am I, she said. But I'm still here. Lucian looked at her, and for a moment, the walls cracked. I don't want to lose you, he said. Then don't, she whispered. But he didn't reach for her. And Elara realized then this wasn't about Margaret. Or his parents. Or even his past. It was about whether Lucian Avery could believe he was worthy of love from someone who didn't want anything from him but his heart. And if he couldn't, she didn't know how much longer she could keep offering it. She left that night without looking back. Elara stared at the cracked screen of her phone, the last call to Lucian still sitting unanswered. The silence stretched into its third day, and she'd stopped making excuses for him. She'd stopped telling herself he just needed space or that work had swallowed him whole. The truth was simpler and harder. The man who had once looked at her like she was the only thing keeping him grounded had vanished behind the walls he promised he wouldn't rebuild. At the cafe, she poured herself into back-to-back shifts, even picking up deliveries again. Anything to keep her feet moving forward. But every time she passed the corner of Fifth with the Astoria Grand rising like a monument of marble and mirrored glass, her chest caught. She didn't cry. Not once. But she stopped laughing easily. Stopped lingering in bookstores or taking long walks through the village. It wasn't heartbreak in the cinematic sense. It was quieter, subtler. Like a door inside her had closed, and she'd forgotten what it felt like to stand in the sun. A week after she walked out of his penthouse, Elara was heading home from a late shift when a town car pulled up beside her on Lexington. She barely glanced at it until the back window rolled down and a woman's voice called her name. Elara Preston? She turned, instantly alert. The woman was in her 60s, elegant but severe, dressed in a wool coat with a brooch shaped like a falcon at the collar. Her hair was silver, swept up in a style that probably hadn't changed in decades. Yes? I'm Margot Avery, the woman said. Lucian's mother. May I speak with you? Elara blinked. You tracked me down? I have resources, the woman said simply. But I didn't come here to intimidate you. Elara crossed her arms. Then why are you here? Margot opened the door wider. Because I think you're the only person who can help my son. The interior of the car was warm, the soft smell of leather, and something floral lingering in the air. Elara didn't speak until the door closed behind her. I thought you disapproved of him. Of everything he's done. Margot looked out the window at the passing city. I did. For a long time. I thought grief made him reckless, impulsive. But I was wrong. It made him human. He shut us out because we didn't know how to hold space for his pain. Elara studied her. So this is an apology tour? No, Margot said. It's desperation. I saw what he was like before you. And I see what he's become now that you're gone. Elara's throat tightened. He pushed me away. Because he's terrified, Margot said. My son is brilliant. But he believes that love is conditional. That it can be taken from him the moment he lets it in. Elara swallowed hard. You think I can fix that? I think you already started to. He just doesn't know how to hold on to something he thinks he doesn't deserve. The car slowed at a light, the city buzzing around them. Elara leaned back, eyes on the ceiling. I don't know if I can go through it again. Being shut out. Watching him retreat. Margot reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. This was delivered to our family estate. It's from Lucian. I haven't opened it. But I think you should. Elara hesitated, then took it. The handwriting was familiar, sharp and steady. She opened it slowly, her fingers trembling. The note was short. I thought I built walls to protect what mattered. But I built them to hide behind. I miss you. I see you in everything. And I'm sorry. For all of it. Elara folded the note and held it in her lap. Margot spoke gently. There's a gala tonight. His company's annual winter benefit. He's supposed to speak. But he told the board he might not show. Elara looked out the window. Do you think he's hoping I will? I think he's hoping you haven't given up. The car pulled to a stop in front of her apartment. Margot didn't follow her out. Whatever you choose, she said. Thank you for being kind to him when the rest of us weren't. Elara stepped onto the sidewalk, the envelope still clutched in her hand. Inside her apartment, she stared at the dress bag hanging untouched in her closet. The black gown he'd given her for the first gala. She'd never returned it. She'd thought about it several times, but she couldn't bring herself to let it go. That night she took it down. The Metropolitan Club glowed with warm light and pressed tuxedos. Snow had just begun to fall, soft flakes gathering on velvet coats and gloved hands. Elara stepped out of the cab and froze at the sight of the building. She nearly turned around. But then she remembered the way Lucian had looked the night he first kissed her, like someone who'd found something they didn't believe existed. Inside, the crowd murmured with conversations and clinking glasses. She spotted familiar faces. Margaret Levington in a red dress surrounded by men twice her age. Board members she recognized from photographs Lucian had shown her once, when he was trying to explain the pressure of legacy. But Lucian was nowhere in sight. She moved through the crowd, scanning faces, until she found a staff member near the stage. Lucian Avery? She asked. The man shook his head. He's not here. The speech might be cancelled. Elara stepped onto the terrace, the cold biting at her bare shoulders. She closed her eyes and pressed her hands to the railing, trying to steady her breath. Nice view, a voice said behind her. She turned. Lucian stood just inside the doorway, his tuxedo slightly wrinkled, his tie undone. His eyes were red-rimmed, his jaw tight. You came, he said. I almost didn't, she admitted. I wouldn't have blamed you. She crossed her arms. Then why are you here? He walked out slowly, the snow beginning to gather on his shoulders. Because I couldn't pretend anymore. Not to the board. Not to the people in there. And not to myself. Elara's voice was low. You shut me out. I did, he said. Because I thought if I let you stay, you'd see the worst parts of me. And leave on your own. Her throat burned. You could have trusted me. I didn't know how, Lucian said. But I want to learn. He stepped closer. The truth is, I don't care about the company without you. I don't care about the skyline or the suits or the way people say my name like it's a brand. None of it means anything without you beside me. She shook her head. You broke my heart, Lucian. I know, he said. And I'll spend the rest of my life proving that I can hold it gently. If you let me. She looked up at him, her voice unsteady. You don't get to just say the right words and erase everything. I'm not trying to erase it, he said. I'm trying to earn it back. He pulled something from his pocket. Not a ring. A key. Simple silver, with an engraved E on one side. I asked the locksmith to duplicate the only key I never thought I'd give away, he said. Not because I want you to move in. Not because I want to trap you. But because I want to show you that this is your home too. If you want it. She stared at it. You're serious. I've never been more. The silence filled with the sound of snow falling through the city. Finally, she stepped forward and took the key. I'm not promising forever, she said. I'm not asking for it, Lucian replied. I'm asking for today. And then I'll ask again tomorrow. And every day after. She reached for his hand. Then today, she whispered. Yes. He pulled her into his arms, and the kiss that followed wasn't like the first one. It wasn't cautious or careful. It was full of every word they hadn't said, every mistake they'd made, every ounce of love that had survived despite it all. Inside the gala, someone announced that the speech would commence in 5 minutes. Lucian looked down at her. Want to come with me? Elara smiled. Only if you're ready to tell the truth. I am, he said. They walked in hand. When Lucian stepped onto the stage, the room quieted. He didn't read from the cards on the podium. Instead, he looked out at the crowd, then down at Elara. For years, I believed success meant building walls. Protecting what I had. But I've learned that real strength comes from letting people in. From loving without guarantees. From risking everything for someone who makes you feel alive again. He paused. So tonight, I'm not just speaking as the head of a company. I'm speaking as a man who fell in love with someone who walks through the world with courage and grace and fire. Someone who reminded me that worth isn't measured in numbers or names. It's measured in the way we choose each other. Every day. He stepped back. The applause was thunderous. Later, in the back of the car, Elara leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. You kissed me once and said I turned your world upside down, she murmured. He brushed her hand with his. You didn't. You made it right side up. And outside the window, the city kept glowing. But now, it wasn't the skyline that took her breath away. It was the man beside her. The man who loved her not despite who she was but because of it. The snow melted into slush by the time Lucian and Elara stepped out of the car in front of the brownstone on Perry Street. It had taken them nearly 2 hours to slip away from the gala. Every executive and board member had wanted a word with Lucian, and every time she tried to step aside to give him space, he'd tightened his grip on her hand. Now, as he unlocked the front door, Elara looked up at the ivy-covered facade and blinked. This isn't the Penthouse, she said. No, Lucian replied as he pushed open the door. This was my brother's place. I kept it. Never rented it out. Never stepped inside after the funeral. Until last week. She stepped into a warm space that smelled faintly of cedar and old books. The walls were lined with photographs, some framed, some pinned haphazardly. None of it was polished or curated. It felt lived in. Loved. Lucian hung up his coat, watching her quietly. I didn't want to pretend anymore, he said. Not about who I am. Or where I come from. This was the last piece I hadn't faced. Elara walked slowly through the living room, her fingers brushing the edge of an old upright piano. A photo sat on top of it, 2 boys in their teens, grinning with their arms slung around each other. She recognized Lucian instantly. The other boy had his same eyes, but brighter. You were happy, she said. He came to stand beside her. We were reckless. Loud. No one could tell us we weren't invincible. She turned to him. Why show me this now? Because I want you to know everything. And because I want you in every part of my life, not just the parts that look good under chandeliers. Elara leaned into him, resting her head against his shoulder. Then stop waiting for it all to fall apart. I'm not, he said. I'm ready to build something that lasts. She looked up at him, and he kissed her forehead. They stayed the night in the brownstone. Not in the guest room, but in the main bedroom upstairs, where Lucian had stripped the sheets and replaced them with new ones only days earlier. The space was quiet, grounded, and when they woke, sunlight poured through the windows like a promise. In the days that followed, things didn't return to normal, they became something better. Lucian called the board and formally stepped back from day-to-day operations. He didn't leave the company, but he shifted his focus to mentoring younger executives and launching a philanthropic wing under his brother's name. He didn't announce it to the press. He simply did it. Elara, meanwhile, stopped delivering groceries. Lucian never once asked her to quit. But she'd outgrown the hustle. Instead, she accepted an offer to manage programming at a local youth center in Midtown, a place where she could use her math tutoring skills and community connections. They hired her on the spot after she showed up with a notebook full of curriculum and a refusal to accept the salary they offered without negotiation. One afternoon, she came home to find Lucian in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, trying to make a lemon tart from scratch. He glanced over his shoulder as she entered, flowers streaked across his forehead. "Don't laugh," he said. "I'm trying to master the art of zest." Elara leaned against the counter, an amused gleam in her eye. "You're zesting with a cheese grater. Which is apparently not the same thing." He held up the shredded lemon rind like a defeated warrior. She crossed the room and took the grater from him. "You know you could have just ordered dessert." "I could have," he said, brushing a hand against her waist. "But I wanted to make something with my hands." "For you." She melted a little, even as she rolled her eyes. "You're ridiculous." "I'm in love," Lucian corrected. She stilled, the zesting tool forgotten in her hand. "You've never said it out loud before." He took her hand and laced their fingers together. "I love you," he said, no hesitation. "In all the ways I didn't know I could. In all the places I thought were too broken." Her breath hitched, and she leaned up to kiss him, her hands curling into his shirt. "I love you too," she whispered. In the quiet that followed, he tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "So, about that tart. You're banned from zesting," she teased. "I accept my limitations." That night they burned the tart. But they danced barefoot in the kitchen while it cooled, and Lucian promised to never trust a recipe that didn't include room for error. Spring came early that year, and with it, a softness neither of them had expected. Lucian took Elara to a restored glass house in the Hudson Valley for her birthday, where they spent an entire weekend reading in hammocks and watching rain collect on the ceiling. She surprised him in return by booking a private tour of the museum where his brother's favorite painting hung, arranging with the curator to have it moved to a private viewing room for 1 hour. Lucian didn't speak for 10 minutes when he saw it. He just held her hand and blinked hard. "You remembered," he said. "I remember everything you let me see." That night he kissed her like he had the first time, deliberate, slow, and without an ounce of uncertainty. By summer, they found themselves back in the brownstone more often than the Penthouse. Lucian kept both places, but Perry Street felt more like home. They hosted small dinners, never more than 6 people. Elara invited friends from the youth center. Lucian invited colleagues who had never seen him outside a boardroom. One evening, as they cleared plates from a rooftop dinner with string lights overhead, Lucian turned to her, a dish towel in one hand and something else in his eyes. "Elara," he said carefully, "I want to ask you something. And I need you to know it's not about timing or pressure. It's about truth." She set down the wine glass she was holding and met his gaze. "I love our life," he said. "I love you. I don't need anything to change. But I'd like to give you this." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple ring, nothing flashy, just a thin band with a single sapphire set in the center. "It's not a proposal," he said. "Not yet. It's a promise. That I'm not going anywhere. That whatever we build, I want to build it with you." Elara stared at the ring, then at him. "You made it sound like you were going to ask me to move to a vineyard." I'll save that for next year. She laughed, and tears shimmered in her eyes. Then yes. Yes to the promise. He slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit like it had been waiting for her all along. They didn't rush. They didn't need to. Love wasn't about speed for them, it was about depth. About showing up every day with open hands. Eventually, they did get engaged. Quietly. On a rooftop in Florence, after Elara had finished leading a youth workshop abroad. Lucian stood beside her as the bells of the Duomo rang out, and this time, there was no hesitation. Just a question, and her answer. Yes, forever. They married a year later in Central Park, under a canopy of paper lanterns and a sky the color of pearl. No press. No investors. Just their closest friends, Lucian's mother, who now brought Elara flowers every month, and the life they had chosen together. Elara wore a dress with pockets. Lucian wore a tie she'd picked out the day before. And when they kissed, it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like the beginning of every version of home they'd ever dreamed of. Years later, on a lazy Sunday morning in the brownstone, Lucian sat on the floor with their daughter, a toddler with wild curls and a laugh just like his brother's. Elara stood in the kitchen, watching them, her heart full. Lucian looked up and caught her gaze. You did this, he said. She walked over, knelt beside them, and kissed the top of their daughter's head. We did. Outside, the city kept moving. But inside, in the space they'd made from truth and tenderness and second chances, time finally stood still. And they never needed to run again.